Beach Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and it's time for another video where I talk about how I think white is getting a little too good in the format. It's been a while since I've made one. This is just going to be a good old rant video because I have a little bit of complaining to do, but I do have some, I think, very valid points to make as well. Of course, if you've been playing the Commander format for at least as long as I have or longer, you will know that everybody used to complain about how bad white was in the format. And I have made the case before that the reason why that was is because the things that everybody wanted to do in the format, like draw lots of cards and ramp lots, white didn't do very well. And also the things that white did really good, like destroying everyone's lands or destroying everyone's everything, balance effects, stuff like that. People just didn't like doing stuff. Or Staxy effects, right? The stuff that white did really, really good. The balance effects, right? Like, let's even things out. People didn't like effects like that in the format. That's why everyone complained about white in the format. So of course, because as I just talked about in a video recently, Wizards of the Coast is more and more printing cards specifically for the Commander format. We've pretty much changed what the color white does. So now white is drawing cards a lot better, doesn't need any help in my opinion, and it's ramping a lot better. The second best color in the format, easily in my opinion. And it's also doing a lot of other things way better as well. So let's take a look at the most popular cards in the format. And of course, Sol Ring, #1 in the format. It really shouldn't be included. Whenever you're talking about the most popular cards in the format, Sol Ring's an auto include in every deck, or it could be, so we don't really need to include it. Same goes for Arcane Signet. Arcane Signet goes in every Commander deck, right? So those are the two most popular cards in the format. No big surprise there. #3 is Swords to Plowshares. So a white card, and arguably, you could argue it, whether it's the best removal spell in the format, but a lot of people would say that it is. So the third, again, other than Sol Ring and Arcane Signet, essentially the most popular card in the entire format is Swords to Plowshares, a white card. #4 is Cultivate, or #2 is Cultivate. And next up is Path to Exile. That's right, Path to Exile, which was farther down the list for a long, long time. It has been reprinted 1,000 times. The reason why, for those who don't know, that Path to Exile was not as popular, even though I would argue it's actually a better removal spell than Swords to Plowshares in the Commander format. The reason why it wasn't quite as popular is because it was more expensive, and they were reprinting Swords to Plowshares in every single Commander precon, so of course it was becoming cheaper and cheaper and more accessible. Path to Exile was still a very, I don't know if it's still the most popular removal spell in Modern, but it was. So every Modern player wanted it, so it was kind of expensive. But then, of course, they started reprinting that in every Commander set, which now they do. And now it's even cheaper than Swords to Plowshares. So, of course, more and more people are putting it in their decks. It is now the 5th most popular card in the entire format, and I would imagine it's going to soon be the 4th most popular card in the entire format. So again, other than Sol Ring and Arcane Signet, the 2 most popular cards in the entire format are going to be white spells. Of course, it's removal. White does that best by far. But if you're looking at the most popular cards in the format, green ramp dominates. There's tons of that. Obviously, you have good old-fashioned counterspell. You got a couple of red cards in here in Blasphemous Act and Chaos Warp, which is kind of funny that the most popular red cards in the format are removal spells. You got Cyclonic Rift, of course. You got Rhystic Study, which is the most popular draw option in the format. Not a lot of surprise there. Anybody want to take a guess what the second most popular draw option in the entire format is? That's right, it's a white card. It's Esper Sentinel. Esper Sentinel is one of the most popular cards in the entire format, and it is the second most popular draw option in the entire a white card is the second most popular draw option in the entire format. We also have, of course, one of the most popular removal spells in the entire format in Generous Gift. And then, of course, we have another right after that really popular white card, obviously, in Smothering Tithe. And by the way, I'll just point out, for all the people who think black is the best color in the format, and I actually made a case for it a little while back. There's hardly no black cards at all in the most popular cards in the format. In fact, the most popular black card is Demonic Tutor. I don't think that's a huge surprise. That's the most popular black card in the entire format. And there are 4 white cards that are more popular than the most popular black card. Just saying, maybe that doesn't mean anything. I think it does. But anyway, back to Smothering Tithe. And, you can classify that card however you want, but I think most people would classify it as a ramp card, although, Treasure isn't really ramp. It kind of is. It's in a gray area. But because Smothering Tithe so easily cranks out those treasure tokens regularly, you certainly could classify it as a ramp card. And of course, we got a ton of green ramp above it on the list. But again, one of the most popular cards in the entire format is a white ramp card. So white's doing pretty good in the format, right? I mean, it's doing fantastic. And of course, the fact that they keep reprinting these cards at an insane rate in every single set is making them more affordable and easier for people to auto include it in their decks. And again, the white cards I just mentioned are cards that people would put in any deck, as long as it has white, obviously. Even in a 5-color deck, people are going to put Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, Generous Gift, Smothering Tithe, and Esper Sentinel. Those 5 cards, the 5 most popular white cards in the entire format, you could put in any deck, even a 5-color deck, and they're going to be great for you, right? Just saying. Now, the real reason I'm making this video, though, is not to talk about how white has all these great cards that we all want to be playing. It's to talk about cards that I am actually not a big fan of. 2 of the cards that I really am getting tired of seeing, first of all, Farewell, and I'm not the first person to say that. A lot of people realized pretty quickly, and obviously when this card came out, I said right away, I think this might be the best board wipe in the entire format, and it is. I have made the comparisons to Cyclonic Rift, and a lot of people, when I made that comparison, were like, oh, Cyclonic Rift's way worse because, the other person gets their stuff back and you can cast it instantly. Whatever the reasons are why Cyclonic Rift might be better, sure, there definitely is a case for that. I personally would rather see a Cyclonic Rift in a Commander game than a Farewell. And in the last few weeks, I've played a few games against my patrons where I have seen both, and my opinion hasn't changed. I would much rather pick up all my stuff and then on my turn play likely most of it. That's almost always what happens with Cyclonic Rift. Again, it's insane to me how ever since the beginnings of my channel, I've talked about how I think that card's overrated. It's really, really good, but people's brains are kind of broken when it comes to that card because I guess of what they've seen happen in the past. With a Cyclonic Rift, I pick up all my stuff and then I just play it again on my turn. Almost always. It's really good against tokens and it's really good against counters because they don't come back. It's really good in general. It's a really good card. For me personally, I would rather see a Cyclonic Rift in a Commander game than a Farewell. I think Farewell is worse because I will never see that stuff again. If I have a huge board, I mean, for all you guys that are like, oh, it slows the game down, it just takes longer. Again, isn't Farewell even worse for that? Because it's just exiling, you're basically starting from scratch, And I guess there is the possibility that they only hit the artifacts or the enchantments or the graveyards or whatever. But most of the time, I think 90% of the time I've seen Farewell cast, it hits all modes. So it just exiles all non-land permanents and also hits graveyards as well. So it really slows the game down. There's very few cards that are going to slow the game down as much as a Farewell will. And it's just kind of really unfun. And I know it's weird for me, a guy like me who tells people to play more removal, that Farewell is in an unfun card. But yeah, it's been almost a year now since I took this card out of all my decks. I stopped playing this card a while ago. Okay, so I think that in itself says something. This is one of my least favorite cards now to play against in the entire format. I hate it. It's really unfun. And I don't think I'm alone in saying that. As I tend to do, I put my money where my mouth is. If I don't like playing against a card, I don't play it myself, right? I'm not a hypocrite. So I took this card. I think I have 4 or maybe 5 copies sitting on my box right now. I took it out of all my decks, about probably almost a year ago now. I play a lot of white decks, so obviously I could be playing it a lot more. Funny enough, I actually find that some decks it doesn't fit in, right? I mean, it is exiling your stuff too. So if you have a deck where you want your creatures to be going to your graveyard when they die, you want dies triggers, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of decks where it actually doesn't work because it does exile stuff as well. So it's possible it is overplayed in the format as well. It's just a really not super fun card. It is really resets the board and not in a great way because there's not a lot of ways to get around it, which funny enough, for that reason, makes it even worse because of the next card I'm going to talk about that I think I might stop playing, and that is Teferi's Protection. And Obviously, it's a white card. That's why I'm talking about it. And Teferi's Protection, is the sixth most popular white card in the entire format. And again, just like Smothering Tithe, if Smothering Tithe was a $2 card, it would be in every single commander deck. If Teferi's Protection was a $2 card, it would be in every single commander deck. The only reason why it is, the 20th most popular card in the format and not the fifth most popular card in the format is because it's like a $30 or $40 card. If it was cheaper, people would be playing it a lot more, right? Just like Path to Exile. Path to Exile was like the 20th most popular card in the format. Then they reprinted it 500 times, and now it is the fifth most popular card in the format, right? The same would be, again, for a lot of these white cards. And again, just like all the other ones I talked about, Teferi's Protection would be an auto include for everybody. Even in a 5-color deck, people would be playing this, right? So just think about that. Just think about, I'm playing a 5-color deck. 6 white cards are for sure going in there. The top 6 white cards in the entire format: Path Swords, Smothering Tithe, Esper Sentinel, Generous Gift, and Teferi's Protection. Likely would go in all of your decks if you could. If they were like $1 or whatever, you would be putting them in even your 5-color decks because they're all phenomenal and all in different situations. How many other colors can you say that? How many other colors can you say, okay, we have phenomenal removal, fantastic card draw, a great ramp spell, and also mana fixer as well, and then the best protection spell in the entire format, all in the same color, guys? Just saying. And again, all the people are like, black's the best color in the format. I don't see any black cards at the top of this list of the top cards in the format. Just saying. Now, that being said, I'm going to complain about Teferi's Protection. And again, it's funny how this card has gotten even more annoying because of Farewell. And it's so funny how things work out in the format sometimes. And this is something that I've noticed for a long, long time, where people will complain about something. You'll have an outcry. And Wizards of the Coast certainly should listen to people when they complain, right? Absolutely. When Magic players or Commander players complain about certain things, Wizards of the Coast makes adjustments. Sure. Okay. It's funny how this card came about. If you're new to the format, and obviously Teferi's Protection came out in 2017. So if you haven't been playing Commander since then, or I guess maybe even you haven't been playing the game of Magic since then, it was 7 years ago. Maybe you haven't been playing the game of Magic since then, right? And anyone who's been playing the game for just a few years probably thinks, hey, phasing, it's all over the place. It never used to be, right? And in fact, I think, I could be wrong, but I'm quite certain Teferi's Protection was the first phasing card printed in forever. The phasing didn't really work in the game of Magic. The rules of the game of Magic, and you can go check out my rules video where I talk about zones, and there are certain zones in the game. You have the battlefield, library, right? Graveyard, hand, and of course, command zone. And exile is also a zone, and everything should be fitting in those zones. And phasing doesn't fit with that. That would be the exception to that rule, where when you're playing a game, everything has to be in one of those zones. Phasing doesn't fit with that, right? It doesn't fit in the normal rules of the game. They really had to screw with it a lot in order for it to work. Of course, it's a very old ability, way back from Mirage block. It was originally printed, I believe. And yeah, it doesn't really work in the normal rules of the game, so they had phased it out. They had gotten rid of it. We didn't see it forever. And a lot of people would say the reason they printed Teferi's Protection, funny enough, we've come full circle here, is because of Cyclonic Rift. So many people were complaining about Cyclonic Rift. They hated it. And I believe Wizards of the Coast thought their answer to it would be Teferi's Protection. Teferi's Protection was an answer for Cyclonic Rift, because how do you get around someone bouncing all your permanents? You phase it out. And of course, so they brought back phasing so that people had an answer to Cyclonic Rift and effects like that. And of course, it is a great answer, but they also threw on there your life total can't change and all that as well, which I thought they went a little overboard. And of course, very quickly, again, just like they did with Smothering Tithe. Smothering Tithe is like, hey, here's a way for white to ramp. And very quickly, it became one of the most popular cards in the entire format. Teferi's Protection, same thing. They're like, hey, here's this funny card that phases out all your stuff and you don't have to worry about Cyclonic Rift anymore. And very quickly, people realized how powerful the effect was and started putting it in all of their decks because it can be an absolute game changer. An absolute game changer, right? Again, someone casts a Cyclonic Rift, you Teferi's Protection, you get to keep all your stuff, right? And then on top of that, you also can't have your life total change and all that as well, right? And the farewell is another great example, and it's, if I'm sitting in a game and one guy casts a farewell and I'm like, ugh, farewell. And then my other opponent responds with the Teferi's Protection. I'm like, ugh, it's a double whammy. Now I have one guy who's exiling all my stuff, and the other guy over here, he gets all his stuff saved from getting exiled. And of course, because this card became so popular, this is what Wizards of the Coast does, right? Wizards of the Coast is like, okay, we're going to print Smothering Tithe, and we'll try to throw White a bone here with regards to ramp. Oh, everyone loves it? Oh, let's start doing more treasure token stuff. And now treasure tokens have completely taken over the format. And of course, the same with the Teferi's Protection. Oh, people really love this whole phasing thing. And all of a sudden, phasing came back and you started seeing it everywhere. And now we get a new card that phases stuff out in like every single set now, right? Just like we do with the treasures. For the Commander players, right? The Commander is driving all of this, of course. I'm really starting to hate Teferi's Protection. To me, it's the inverse of a Cyclonic Rift. If you hate Cyclonic Rift, you must hate Teferi's Protection. It's the inverse of it. It does the same thing. It unbalances the game where it gives one player such a massive advantage. And I guess ultimately it's only super annoying when that person is already ahead, right? That's the part that really bothers me. And I see it all the time in games when I'm playing, where it's the guy who is way ahead of everyone else, the guy that needs his board wiped. That's always the guy who's got the Teferi's Protection in hand, right? That's the guy who's just sitting there with a massive board, and you're thinking, okay, someone's got to draw a board wipe here or we're all dead. And that guy's thinking, just leave 3 mana up. That's it. That's all I have. All he has to do now is just leave 3 mana up for the rest of the game. And if anyone actually tries to remove his stuff, he'll just Teferi's Protection. And in fact, this card's so good that I have very often, and I'm sure you guys have as well, seen people just Teferi's Protection, I'll just phase out. I know I got the game won, so on my end step, I'll just phase out and my opponents can do nothing. All my opponents now are going to all take their turns and there's nothing they can do. And this literally happened to me the last game I played where I actually had a board wipe in my hand and I'm like, ugh. And that person just, all they're going to do is just phase in on their turn and likely win the game. Again, the same scenario that people hate Cyclonic Rift so much for is now becoming a thing with Teferi's Protection. And it's so funny, like instant speed board wipes aren't really a thing, right? And it's so funny where now I'm like praying for a Cyclonic Rift. That's where we've gotten with this, right? Now I'm playing games and dude Teferi's Protections and I'm like, oh, does anyone have a Cyclonic Rift so we can instant speed bounce all this stuff on his turn before he kills us all, right? That's where we've gotten. We've kind of come full circle here. So where am I at personally? I have Teferi's Protection in only one deck. I obviously was a huge fan of the card when it first came out. I was like, oh, great. I'm going to buy a bunch and put it on my decks. Of course, it was expensive. I ended up getting, I think I only got one, and I put it in my one deck, and I just left it like that. Again, they started printing Flawless Maneuver and all these other options, so I started using other options for my decks, and I might just take out that one that I had. I just hate it. I really am starting to hate Teferi's Protection. It just so unbalances the game that I just really don't love it. And because I'm not a hypocrite, if I really don't like a card, I don't want to play it myself because I feel like that makes me a hypocrite, right? That's where I'm at. So basically here, I'm talking about, these two cards, white cards that I find to be so powerful and so unbalancing in a Commander game that I've stopped playing Farewell, and I might stop playing Teferi's Protection as well. I've really started to dislike that card a lot. I mean, there's answers. I get it. You can just counter the Teferi's Protection. Maybe I'll start playing Time and Tide. I'm serious. I might. Also, man, white is just killing it in the format right now. It's absolutely killing it. And it's funny how I did my video about the best colors in the format, and I had ranked white number 1, spoiler alert, if you hadn't seen it. And a lot of people said, oh, but you need to add in combat and you need to add in, who has the best creatures, which is like, how do you rank that? Who has the best creatures? I don't know. I think people think green has the best creatures in the format. I don't know about all that. Again, just check out the most popular creatures in the entire format. I did have to add in some more categories. I probably will revisit that video ranking the colors and add in more categories. I do agree. I need to add more categories, but I still think white is going to come out on top. Not only does it do probably the most things well in the format, it also does some things way better than other colors. And in fact, some colors can't do that stuff at all, right? There's no other color that does a Teferi's Protection, right? None. I know people really like black because black draws cards well and tutors well, but Why aren't we seeing any of those black cards at the top of the list, right? I think white is, you could make an argument easily that it's the best color in the format now, and it does almost nothing badly. And in fact, does some things so well that it's actually starting to really bother me. That's my opinion on it. Anyway, you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.